Well, good afternoon. It is Saturday, February 22nd, 2020. Journal number 287, T+326. Bearing down on the first anniversary of my transplant, which is exciting and could actually be what is responsible for this particular blog post, I guess. As Lesley and I were driving across the San Fernando Valley this morning on our way to an appointment, I started thinking. I started thinking about Psalm 90 and specifically verse 10 in that psalm, which is, I think, the first time in the Bible there's reference to 70 70 years, which are supposed to be all we can expect as a lifetime. Like so many things in the Bible, it doesn't always make a lot of sense, but arbitrarily, it seems like a really odd number, especially in a time when people didn't live as long. So I don't know what that's all about, and frankly, I have no idea why that bubbled into my head. But as I wrote in the blog post, one of the reasons that I love windshield time as much as I do, one of the reasons that I love driving as much as I do, is because it appears that while you're driving, much of which is done without a lot of conscious thought, it allows your subconscious to work overtime, shift into overdrive, and allow things to bubble to the surface that might not otherwise ever make it there. And in this particular instance, it happened to be 70. Now, you're probably wondering why, and I can't come up with a reason other than the fact that I'm 3 years past that injunction. So I figured, if you take that at face value, then I'm ahead of the curve. I'm an outlier, especially having been diagnosed with primary myelofibrosis and bone marrow cancer. But the fact of the matter is, what I was thinking about was all of the seemingly unrelated, wildly random variables that had to come together in order for me to be having this conversation with you right now. Not the least of which was staying alive long enough, staying alive with the disease long enough to become eligible for a transplant in the first place. Allowing technology to catch up, because when I was first diagnosed in 2014, that wasn't an option. And I can say that with some degree of certainty because we were looking at 3 different major medical centers, cancer centers, and none of which were really considering someone my age at that time, in the condition of the disease where it was. So that really is the first and probably the most powerful variable that had to fall into place. The second had to be finding a donor, finding somebody whose human leukocyte antigen match, HLA match, was sufficient to ensure that the transplant would be successful. And a good match is 5 out of a possible 14. An adequate match is 5 out of a possible 14. We didn't know there were 14 at the time because everybody kept talking about a 10-point match, which was ideal. And we found a donor, a non-related donor, with a 12-point match and the same blood type, which is crazy altogether because generally speaking, when you get a stem cell bone marrow transplant, the way I did. If the blood type is different, if the donor's blood type is different, you're going to wind up with the donor's blood type, just as you're going to wind up with the donor's DNA. So all of those things had to come together, and you have to ask yourself the question, why? How? Why me? Why me and not someone else? Especially when someone that you know who was in the same hospital for the same reason, at the same age, with the same background, and the same quality of match, never left the hospital. Passed away from an episode of GVHD, especially when you know another patient with primary myelofibrosis that was in the hospital far longer and suffered far more than I did. But was fortunate enough to overcome all of that and be released. The only thing I can think of is that it has to have something to do with service and what you've dedicated your life to and how much you've tried to give back and how much you have yet to give. At least that's what I'd like to think. Because I'd like to believe that there is some force that orders the universe. And if there is, then that makes sense to me. As always, I'd be kind of interested in what you have to say. I don't mean to be maudlin or get that introspective or self-involved, but it is something to think about. I mean, we're all here for a reason, and it seems like we ought to be anyway. It would be nice if we would be able to figure out what that purpose is, and then use that purpose, use that why to give meaning to our lives and to the lives of the people we interact with all the time. In the meantime, stay well and take care. That's it for now.